Okay, hopefully the fourth dim is a charm. I just rebooted my whole system, and so hopefully we'll be able to continue without any more interruptions. A lot of news to cover. I'm just going to dive right into it since we got a slow start today. Um, I want to get a little serious, and I think this is interesting. Um, this is very political, but at the same time, I think it's interesting when you have someone in a situation. Um, Life or death situation. And yes, I'm talking about the attempted assassination of former President Trump. And this is not just about him, um, but also what happened. And so I'm just going to start off kind of in the middle. And when he talks about he was pointing out a chart. In order to see the chart, President Trump, and this is his words from last night, the final night of the RNC convention. Um, he started to like this turn to my right, and was ready to begin a little bit further turn to point out the charts, which I'm very lucky I didn't do. When I heard a loud whizzing sound and felt something hit me really hard, really, really hard on my right ear, I said to myself, wow, what was that? It can only be a bullet. And moved my right hand to my ear and brought it down. My hand was covered with blood, just absolutely blood all over the place. I immediately knew it was very serious that we were under attack, and in one movement proceeded to drop to the ground. Bullets were continuing to fly as very brave Secret Service agents rushed to the stage, and they really did. They rushed to the stage. These are great people at great risk, I will tell you, and pounced on top of me so that I would be protected. There's blood pouring everywhere, and yet in a certain way I felt very safe because I had God on my side. I felt that. The amazing thing is that prior to the shot, if I had not moved my head, at least that very last instant, the assassin's bullet would have been perfectly hit its mark, and I would not be here tonight. We would not be here together. We would not be here together. The most incredible aspect of what took place on that terrible evening in the fading sun was actually seen later. In almost all cases, as you probably know, and even when a single bullet is fired, just a single bullet, we had many bullets that were being fired, crowds run for the exits or stampede. But not in this case. It was very unusual. This massive crowd of tens of thousands of people stood by and didn't move an inch. In fact, many of them bravely but automatically stood up, looking for where the sniper would be. They knew immediately that it was a sniper, and then began pointing at him. You can see that if you look at the group behind me, that was just a small group compared to what was in front. Nobody ran, and by not stampeding, many lives were saved. But that isn't the reason they didn't move. The reason is that they knew I was in very serious trouble. They saw it, they saw me go down. They saw the blood and thought, actually most did, that I was dead. They knew it was a shot to the head. They saw the blood, and there's an interesting statistic. The ears are the bloodiest part. If something happens with the ears, they bleed more than any other body part of the body. For whatever reason, the doctors told me that. I said, why is there so much blood? He said, it's the ears, they bleed more. So we learned something, but this beautiful crowd, they didn't want to leave me. They knew I was in trouble. They didn't want to leave me, and you can see that love written all over their faces. True. So it just keeps going on about what actually happened. Um, it's very telling, and anytime something like this happens, where someone's targeted, it really has a much bigger impact than we can understand. Um, so when someone is targeted politically with a shooting, the people there they were convinced he was dead, which is why he stood up and threw his fist up, so that people would see that he was still alive. It's not so in most situations. When Gabby Giffords was shot, this Republicans and Democrats. I mean, JFK was killed. Ronald Reagan was shot. I mean, it happens on both sides of the political aisle, and it's a tragedy every single time. And the people there thought he was dead, didn't know what to think. But I think this really goes to the American spirit, that people didn't stampede. People reacted very quickly. And one other thing that I want to share from that. Another article. And this one is. I'm sorry, this is being recorded. I don't think this is streaming live, but do the best we can. Um, Last night, President Trump unveiled a tribute for Mr. I believe Comparatore, who was fatally shot. Um, and so there's a memorial of his firefighter's jacket and helmet, and explained that he, again, GoFundMe has been put up to raise money for him, and President Trump was announced he was donating $1 million to the family, the fire chief and his family, and stated it was a very fine man. So President Trump called him, but President Biden did as well, and we want to recognize that as a recognize the efforts that they both took to remember him and the fallen. And again, we have 2 people in the hospital still, serious injuries, but they're expected to fully recover. Again, it's a tragedy when anything happens like this. So, moving on, there's a lot of craziness in the world today, and a lot of it has dropped off the front pages. So, just want to remind people what's going on. I mentioned the other day the Suez Canal. Revenue has dropped almost 25% among Houthi attacks. And they're going after pretty much anybody. So this is really hurting Egypt. And they've lost 25% of their revenue due to Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi terrorists targeting shipping going through the Gulf. So again, this is hurting other countries. It's hurting global trade. And most companies, or many companies, are rerouting their vessels along the longer, more expensive route around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa. So they're going all the way around Africa rather than through the Suez Canal. So many people, it's like there's no real alternative with the time, the risks. So, but again, it's just like we did have problems with pirates or people taking advantage of seizing ships coming out of Ethiopia, and now we've got a similar issue on the other side by Houthis. This is when we have global destabilization, and Iran is funding most of it, or a lot of it. In Yemen, Ethiopia was a different matter, but again, Iran has a horrible history of supporting groups and destabilizing countries. So again, moving on, it's something to be aware of, how it's hurting us, hurting the country, and global trade, which hurts everybody. Bud Light, again, struggling. So, recent article, it fell last year to number 2. Now it's fallen to the number 3 beer in America. Still having fallout from the Dylan Mulvaney controversy when they hired Dylan Mulvaney to be a spokesman for their brand. They since ended that relationship, but they're still down nearly 30% year over year as rivals Modelo and Michelob continue to climb. This is an interesting article. It came from Breitbart. This is something I haven't seen, and it's not being reported very well. So apparently, and we're into another break, so we will be back in a short while. Welcome back, everybody. Time's flying. We try to address this. Got a lot to cover today. Um, but here, this is an interesting thing. Janet Yellen, and I guess they sanction all kinds of people that we don't know about, but they have been targeting Israeli nonprofits and peaceful movements with sanctions if they're protesting what they're doing in Gaza. So mainly sending funds to the Gazan people that is being clearly and obviously everybody recognizes being intercepted by Hamas, and it's just funding Hamas, providing more aid to them. The Hamas is stealing it. Most of it is not getting to the Gazan people, and Hamas is using that to entrench their power. So you have a group called Sav 9, which is protesting against this. That this aid just strengthens Hamas terrorists who steal the supplies. The American government has even acknowledged this. So again, doing stuff that doesn't make sense is what our government tends to excel at. So they've already sanctioned Israel over extremist settler violence, targeting individuals who have not been convicted of any crime, while giving Iran billions of dollars in sanctions relief. So this article is a bit one-sided, but I think the alarming news is that we are targeting, the United States government is targeting Israeli protest movements, people that are trying to bring awareness to what's actually happening with the aid going to Gaza. So the funny part in this is a lot of the sanctions have been responses from Muslim groups complaining about whoever dares call out what's going on by Hamas. So you have Dawn, founded by Jamal Khashoggi, ironically, was supposedly killed by Iran. But again, they're an anti-Israel group, which most of them are. And so it's an extraordinary foray into domestic Israeli politics by our government. But the funny thing is, they got the wrong guy. So even though it's very questionable that we're sitting there sanctioning domestic groups that are just protesting here and not committing any criminal crimes, haven't been charged with anything, the United States government is going in and being judge and jury in a foreign country. They confused the people. So they went in and hit the wrong person, the wrong Sarid, and it's an uninvolved Israeli named Aviad Shlomo Sarid, and mixed up his ID number and birth date instead of the guy that actually heads up Sav 9. So he's had his bank account, credit card blocked, and had his identity appear on a blacklist in error. So the right guy, the guy that he says will continue everything to change the policy of aiding Hamas, which harms our soldiers, until all hostages are returned. So Muslim-aid groups complain, or Muslim non-government NGOs complain, and the United States is now listening to them and sanctioning Israeli groups, which is, I believe, it's outrageous. Why should we be picking one protest group over another? And then they mess it up and get the wrong guy. So again, ironic how incompetent the United States government can be. But again, this is par for the course when we're trying to tip the scales and influence other countries. Any other country doing that to the United States would be considered foreign interference in our government. But again, if it's the right people, we just let it happen. But if it goes the other way, again, there's plenty of complaints. So another issue here. This is a new article that just came out yesterday. So California businesses could take a profits hit with self-checkout elimination. So wonderful California legislature, sarcasm intended, is going after businesses to eliminate theft. So the idea being behind this is that they're saying that part of it is self-checkout stations, that if you have self-checkout, thefts go up. In general, that's true, but businesses, the savings in having to pay people less, not deal with all of the headaches here. I mean, it's. I think it's sad to see much fewer people, to see assistance go down in grocery stores. Customer service has taken a huge hit across the board, but these businesses are struggling to stay afloat, especially in California, where the minimum wage for fast food workers went up to $20 an hour, and pretty much now all minimum wage workers are demanding $20 an hour or soon. So the effect is really hurting small businesses and companies throughout California. So this is a proposed bill. It could be passed as early as, if it's going to pass this year, it has to be passed by August 31st, but California legislature is good at passing these. So they're saying this would be an estimated increase of costs of almost $500 million, falling mainly on grocery retailers and for grocery retailers annually. So again, while tackling retail theft is crucial, there's so many people that just walk right by cashiers, and that is a more concerning thing. So there are places where you don't have that issue, like Costco. So Costco, I love their fast checkout. I try to use it all the time. There's plenty of people there to help. But according to the new law, it's the government telling you exactly what you can and can't do. First of all, that you have to, you can only have one person per two self-checkout stations, and they can't go anywhere. They have to stay right there. They can't help anybody else. They have to be dedicated to those two stations. So again, it's going to drive up labor costs. But one of the big things they point out is the best way to tackle is through enforcing shoplifting laws. California's gone very soft on shoplifting, and that's the biggest reason. That this is continuing. Some companies are going ahead and just removing self-checkout lines to try to combat theft, but there's so many examples of people that load up a grocery cart and then just walk out the door.
The future of legal work is here.
If someone lays a finger on them, they're going to get sued. They could be the ones prosecuted. So the laws are so favor the shoplifters so much. Most California businesses don't know what to do. They just take it as a loss of business doing business in California. And it's become such a problem that there are people going outside. These criminal syndicates that are doing most of this are going outside of California to try to steal in Nevada and Arizona. And Arizona is trying to clamp down on make sure it doesn't, that they prosecute everybody with the shoplifters to the fullest extent of the law. Moving on to one of the main topics for the day. We've got an interesting few articles here all about the same thing, because there's so much happening, so much coming out about student loan forgiveness. So yesterday's the education department came out and said they're going to forgive $1.2 billion more in student loans for 35,000 borrowers. And so they're trying to make fixes to the public service loan forgiveness program. And this is a huge part of the Biden campaign's, to their campaign is, look, we're forgiving student loans. We're doing everything we can to fix this. Problem is, it's illegal. And it keeps getting struck down by the courts. I actually, it was an online, not a seminar, but kind of an infomercial, but they were talking about how using these programs, people can get on something similar to the income-based repayment plan, not pay the interest, and stay on these plans, the new plans that are coming out. And again, the government has to pick up the tab on the interest on these student loans that's accruing as long as you stay in this repayment plan. That's a huge cost savings for the debtor, the person that owes the loans. But at the same time, who's picking up the tab? Taxpayers. And so again, it's just the argument here is that the law to forgive public student loans was first put in law by President George Bush, but it's not helping nearly as many people. Again, they're claiming that it's been plagued by many problems. A lot of people find out they didn't qualify on a technicality, such as loan type or repayment plan. And so they're trying to throw open the doors. The thing is, it's not just this. They're trying to throw open the doors on all kinds of other kinds of loans. And so, again, this is the Supreme Court struck down their first attempt to forgive student loans. And they've just continued full steam ahead forgiving other loans. And the problem is you have, again, the same criteria applies. Biden administration does not have the legal authority to do this. So there's been 3 more courts that have struck down his student loan plans, different aspects of it. And it'll probably go back to the Supreme Court again, where, again, it's going to reinforce that he has no legal authority to do so. It's all been done by executive fiat, which means it'll probably get reversed like that. One of the biggest issues here, again, they're just following the Supreme Court. The 8th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled Thursday, so yesterday. It will prohibit the Biden administration from implementing parts of its SAVE program. And this is the same program that was being pitched to me Tuesday. So there are people talking about it, and I think, look, if we can help people pay student loans, great. But the idea, this isn't helping people pay student loans. This is helping people avoid the student loans or the interest on the debt that they accrued. So, and again, last Thursday it announced that it would do another $1.2 billion in student loans, covering the debt for 35,000 people. So this is just one article here, $1.2 billion being forgiven, and the next article is saying, look, this is struck down by the courts. So this part of it was struck down, and then again, Biden announces another plan to forgive yet more student loans. He has no support from Congress on this. And the courts have ruled time and time again that he does not have the legal authority to do so. So, and who's paying for it? First of all, the average person that's giving this, I think it's the average amount being paid, and this really jumps to the next article, is making over $100,000. So here, Mayor Melvin Carter of St. Paul, Minnesota, posted a screenshot of his student loan balance of $0. So again, it's talking about how the consequences of his student loan cancellation scheme will be felt for years. It has a triple effect through the economy, and it's going to add vastly to the national debt. So it's interesting how the left attacks Trump ad nauseum. If you cut taxes, it's going to add to the debt. It's going to add to the debt, national debt. But yet, canceling student loans is great and adds to the national debt. So, I mean, the national debt has to be tackled. Neither party I haven't seen a serious plan by either party. That's one of the criticisms we'll get to later. But why are we paying off student loans for mayors of major cities that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars? That doesn't make sense to me. He received a salary of $132,200, and he was very ecstatic to have his student loans wiped out. But if he's making $132,000, just from his salary, and he probably has other sources of income. Why are we? This is not someone in dire need here. Um, and then, so back in 2020, it was policy analysts said, hey, canceling student debt makes income inequality worse because who is getting this? Upper income individuals. This is not going to poor, struggling families. You're having blue collar people, most of them didn't go to college, pay for, through the taxes, etc., the student loans for people that are coming out with degrees, doctorates, masters, whatever. It is a very regressive policy, and one of the biggest complaints about it is that it's a naked, ploy to buy votes ahead of a presidential election. So it's just, look at me, I'm helping people out, but it's anybody fighting it is looked at as the bad guy. But again, it'll add 160 billion to the national debt with there's no return, there's no improvement to the economy, etc. It's just taxpayers are footing the bill, and again, there's a $195 price tag for the loan payment pause that happened through COVID. Now, in the spring of 2020, Joe Biden wasn't president yet. President Trump did that. It made sense, though, when we shut down the economy that we weren't forcing people to pay government loans when we told everybody you can't work. But again, the playing with student loans has led to all kinds of other demands. What is the result when we have people just cancel and walk away from it? If people think they don't have to pay their student loans, who's going to pay it? If we have, it's like immigration. The more people we let into the country illegally, why would they come into the country legally? And I do, I know someone personally that they fought long and hard to come into the country legally, get their family here legally. And it's tough. It is not easy. I think it's too tough. I think we need to allow people that go through the legal process to come here easier. But politically, there's no way to change that unless we actually do something about all the people coming over here illegally. And as individuals said, look, it makes no sense. They look like chumps. Doing everything right, paying all the right fees, and going through all the processes to come here legally, when it would be so much cheaper to just walk across the border. Now, again, one of the complaints and concerns is that you'll get lower quality education with loan debt forgiveness because we're just throwing money at the problem issue. If people aren't going to be held responsible, that does not encourage people to get degrees that will actually pay for themselves over time. So again, there's a lot of perverse economic incentives here, and the article goes on. And so I'm running out of time for the next break, so we're just going to finish up here. In a way, it's legalized plunder, a term coined by a 19th century economist. The state's transgressions of property rights, false philanthropy, where the state hurts the public at large to help a small group of people for PR purposes, for campaign models, and say, look what I'm doing. But overall, it hurts the government, and it provides very perverse incentives to go through. Just like forgiving student loans for mayors, while your average person's taxes and the national debt goes up and up. So we'll be right back after this next break. Welcome back, everybody. Hubert Johnson here. Just want to share a quick article here. Don't even plan to go into it this much. A Wall Street Journal was just convicted in a Russian court. The government is calling it a sham trial. It was just a Wall Street journalist following the pattern of Brittany Griner, where Russians grab someone, sentence them to a very long period, a very horrible sentence, 16 years in a penal colony. Yes, they still have those in Russia. After they did a rushed espionage trial, even moving their own trial date up by over a month just to get a quick conviction against a Wall Street Journal reporter. So we saw the same thing with Brittany Griner, where they grabbed someone that was important to the Biden administration, convicted her, and then demanded. We traded Griner for merchant of death, Victor Bout. So they got a very dangerous, nasty person that we released, and we got a WNBA player. So as far as national security, very lopsided trade. But this is why we shouldn't deal with people, and we should demand that the rule of law should be followed, because it just encourages more of the same. So again, it's no surprise that Russia has grabbed someone else. The Wall Street Journal came out with some very strong words for this sham conviction. He's already been in prison 478 days. And again, it looks like he's not getting out anytime soon unless we either give up some very nasty people to the Russians, or we make a trade. We make a trade, or we get in there and really exert some political influence on Russia. So again, scary for Americans traveling overseas. Next article here. This jumps back to the IRS real quick. When I hit a couple quick articles before tackling some of the stuff coming out from the Trump campaign. FATCA registration. So this is, just want to touch on this. This is about foreign accounts. For FATCA, FBAR compliance. If you don't know what that means, that's fine. Most people don't. If you have overseas assets, if you have any total overseas assets of $10,000 or more, you need to talk, first of all, to your CPA. Make sure it's reported, but you should also talk to a tax attorney, because I've done whole shows on that. It's very scary. The IRS can take half of the minimum penalty is half of the asset value plus criminal penalty. So this is something that's kind of gone under the radar because a bunch of other things is going on. But the IRS is still going after this with gusto, and they're prosecuting people for this. Another thing I want to mention on this came out yesterday: IRS cracking down on cryptocurrency. So let me go ahead and share this article. This is very true. I've seen it. So they've investigated nearly 400 cases, and these are people going for criminal prosecution. So, and half of those were sent for criminal persecution. Probably meant prosecution. So, don't leave digital assets off of your tax returns. It is a law that you have to report them. So they're training, right now they're focusing on acquiring tools and training, but all of it is reported. And the cryptocurrency that doesn't report to the IRS is usually on the dark web, and those are usually the worst scams. So again, you could very well be just flushing down your money down the toilet rather than paying taxes on gains. So again, be very careful out there. If you're not reporting those, you very well might need to hire someone like me to help fix a giant mess that's created by doing so. So moving on. So Governor Youngkin from Virginia spoke at the RNC about proposed tariffs. And now there's a lot of competing information going back. Tariffs are bad, tariffs are good. It depends who's talking, and it depends whose tariffs they're talking about. So the funny thing is, let me go ahead and share this. This is from the Washington Examiner. Trump's talking about a 10% across the board fee on all products imported to the U.S. Could help. 10% isn't a high tariff, but one of the things is we do definitely need to put high tariffs on Chinese markets. Will this have higher, drive up costs? Yes. Will it encourage U.S. domestic production? Yes, but it also reduces global trade. So there's trade-offs here. But one thing everybody talks, I see all kinds of articles slamming this. Tariffs are horrible. Tariffs are the problem. Tariffs are needed to go after bad actors and balance trade because China they're cheating every way possible. And that's what China's always done. And one of the big concerns out here is China. But relying on tariffs exclusively can be very poor tax policy in the long term. So it's fine to do, I would say, maybe a little bit. Most other countries respond in kind with similar tariffs. So it's not a silver bullet here. But both the Biden administration and the Biden administration tried to outdo Trump. Trump called for 60% tariffs on China, and Biden came out and said, "I'd do 80% or 100%." They're both saying the same thing. And recognizing that something needs to be done with China, but I think it's interesting to see how tariffs play out. I don't think, and Trump has floated the idea of getting rid of income taxes altogether. I don't think that's a great policy because tariff income is dependent on goods still being imported and bought in the United States.
Extension that you wish to intercom, followed by pound.
So, moving on to the next article. Where does he stand on taxes, tariffs, and more? Definitely stands for lower taxes across the board, more tariffs to put the burden on foreign companies and imports, but that will make things very possibly more expensive, which is one of the key complaints about tariffs. I do think so basically when it comes to taxes, he wants to put the Trump tax cuts, make them permanent. You have 3.4 trillion in individual income and estate tax cuts that are expiring next year at the end of 2025. And so his whole goal is to make it permanent if he's reelected in November. I don't know why they didn't make it permanent in the first place. It's political gamesmanship, and both sides do it. One of the reasons is they kind of set it out there so it becomes a big selling point. Hey, Biden will make your taxes going up. It's like, why didn't you do that in the first place? Eliminating taxes on tips. That is a big part of what he has added. There's a lot of mixed feelings. People say that it doesn't really help the poorest, people that aren't making tips, but in industries and jobs where people do work for tips, taxing tips, I think, is counterproductive. You're taking people, you don't have, you do have some people making decent money, servers, waiters making good money on tips. But these are people that are going to school, a lot of times using tips to support themselves. Hotel workers, people that work very hard, usually in low-paying jobs. The tips can absolutely make up the difference. I think that's a good idea, but again, we'll see how it plays out. Oil and drilling. Easy way to bring down stubborn inflation is by decreasing energy costs. The Biden administration at times has decreased energy costs and recognized that by opening up our national strategic reserves. And they did that just before the 4th of July to lower prices for people and say, oh, look, we did something for the 4th of July. But permanent change and to really address inflation, lowering energy costs, which affects pretty much every sector of the market, will definitely help the economy. It will help, globally as well, help the United States globally as well. We have, they call it liquid gold. But one of the big things that would hurt is by lowering gas prices it hurts our dependence on foreign oil, and it hurts the worst actors in the world: Russia, China, Iran, Venezuela. Those are the people it would hurt the most. It would hurt OPEC, but OPEC has not been our friend lately, choosing to align themselves with China and Russia rather than our traditional, alliance with Saudi Arabia and OPEC. So again, it's been a lot of reverses in federal policy and domestic foreign policy lately. So one of the big issues is the Federal Reserve. So President Trump said he would allow him to finish his term, ends in May 26th, but not reappoint him. And the question is, is he apolitical? I mean, the Fed likes to play with things, likes to put their fingers on what's happening with interest rates. Do they help the situation or do they make it worse? So the whole argument for the Fed is that they got rid of high spikes and drops in the market. But you could argue that, especially through the Great Depression, more government interference created the Great Depression. A lot of people, a lot of economists believe that all of the government aid and government spending that went out throughout the Great Depression exacerbated, destroyed the power of the dollar, and did more economic harm than good. That the economy would have recovered much faster on its own than having the government interfere with it. And that's a topic for another day. But I have one last article I want to share. And this is from The Hill, which typically is more left-leaning. But you have Pinar Wilbur, who's an economist, sharing this. And one of the things he talks about is an uncertain economy. Right now, we're still dealing with high inflation, higher than it should be, 50% higher than the goals. Real inflation is actually much higher. And, the question is, what are the different ways that they're going to tackle this? So, President Biden generally wants to raise taxes on corporations, on high earners, and they're doing this to control rising U.S. debt, is what they say, but also driving certain social policy goals. So if they were serious about containing the debt, they've spent way more. We're still spending about $2 trillion more than our income. It's estimated that our debt will just continue to grow by 2034 to about close to $3 trillion, that we're spending more than our income. So again, it doesn't matter how much they raise in taxes if we just continue to spend $2 trillion more than what we earn every single year. So it's close to we're bringing about between 4 to 5 trillion. We're spending close to 7 trillion every year. So that's roughly 33% of our budget. We're spending more than we bring in. So again, both sides of the aisle have to take this into account. But they argue the focus should not be on the debt problem, but on creating a balanced tax code that encourages growth. And he says not all taxes are equal. Certain taxes, affect things a lot more, and it causes people to drive things. So the big thing he talks about is the corporate rate. It was at 35%, one of the highest before 2017. Dropping it down to 21% put us just below the average for developed nations, which is at 23.7% is the average based on 2023. So again, made us competitive again. One of the things he goes through the number of Fortune 500 companies centered out of China versus the United States, and that since 2020 we've actually gained ground in this. We used to be very dominant, having over 179 versus 129 and 121 in China. And that number's come back up to 136 in 2023 compared to 135 in China. But again, while we've lost, it's gone to other countries. So keep it in mind, hurting and just attacking corporations and the wealthy, that cost just gets passed on to other people. It means we have less profit, less manufacturing here in the United States. And we're all Americans. We're all in this boat together. So I think too often, and I am one thing good that's coming out of this attempted assassination, that I think we've seen more civility on both sides of the aisle. There are exceptions to that, but I have plenty of people that, friends that are very liberal and don't like Trump at all, that I've actually pushed out and say, hey, we need to be, we're still people, we're still Americans first, and that's what we should be doing. And I'm glad to see that on both sides of the aisle. Taking a step back from the vitriol. And when we go to the ballot box, when we consider these different proposals, don't rely on student loan cancellations. They're being overturned right and left, and it's very possible that they'll be struck down en masse. So stay with us, and we'll be back next week.